A millionaire was driving when he suddenly collided with two youngsters on the road. As he got out of his car to see what happened, the little girl whispered, "Please help my little brother first," which stunned the millionaire. He immediately rushed both children to the emergency room, only to uncover an unspeakable heartache. Inside the Petal Palace flower shop, shadows enveloped the rotting wooden shelves. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and wilted blossoms. Lily sat on the cold floor holding Sammy close. Her 6-year-old brother was burning up like a piece of coal, his breathing a painful wheezing sound struggling past a swollen throat. Their Aunt Martha and Uncle Roy had locked the door early that morning to play cards down the street. They had left behind only a dried-out crust of bread and a half-empty bottle of water. Sammy listened to me. "You have to keep drawing a breath. I'm not leaving you here alone. Mom and Dad are watching over us." Lily looked down at her brother's lips, which were starting to turn a troubling shade of blue. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. If they stayed put, Sammy wouldn't make it through the night. Lily gently laid him on the thin blanket, then hurried to the back storage area. She grabbed a small metal bar and with all her might pried open the rusted padlock. With a dry grating sound, the lock broke free. Lily hauled her father's old bicycle out of the dark corner. The bike was far too big for her frail 12-year-old frame. The tires were worn down, and the chain rattled with every movement. This was the only treasure Uncle Roy hadn't managed to sell yet to cover his gambling debts. "I'm so sorry I had to break the lock, Sammy, but we have to go." Lily gently lifted Sammy and placed him in the basket at the front of the bike. She wrapped a blanket around him and secured him tightly to the frame with a rope so he wouldn't fall out. Lily began to pump the pedals. The road to the county hospital, over 6 miles long, stretched out beneath the gray sky. A sudden downpour started. The intense rain blurred Lily's vision, and the road became slick and treacherous. She strained to pedal through the water-filled potholes. Her small legs trembled, but she didn't stop. Lily urged herself to go faster. As she reached the Hillcrest incline, the dividing line between the impoverished neighborhood and the upscale, luxurious estates, Lily gripped the brakes to slow down. A sudden snap rang out. The old brake cable had broken clean off. The bicycle spun out of control, rocketing down the steep hill. "Sammy, duck your head. Hold on tight to the basket." Lily tried to drag the worn heels of her shoes against the pavement to slow the bike, but it was useless. The bike hit a large curbstone and flipped over. Sammy was thrown from the basket, lying still on the wet grass. The handlebars struck Lily hard on the left side of her chest. The sharp jolt of pain made her dizzy, and her breath caught in her throat. She crawled across the ground, ignoring the trickle of crimson fluid from her knee, making her way toward her brother. At that exact moment, a sleek black Mercedes Maybach skidded to a stop. Arthur Vance stepped out. He was dressed in an impeccable gray suit, still holding his phone mid-conference call. Vance stared at the two children smeared with mud lying in the middle of the road. Before he could speak, a small, mud-caked hand gripped the smooth fabric of his tailored trousers. Lily looked up at Vance with an expression of desperate pleading. A crimson drop from her nose fell onto the businessman's polished leather shoes. "Please, rush my little brother to the medical center first." "I'm okay. His heart is very fragile. He can't wait like I can." Vance looked down at the small patch of color spreading on the grassy lawn. He heard Sammy's weak, rattling respiration just a few feet away. He was about to ask another question, but Lily's grip loosened and her body collapsed onto the cold asphalt. Arthur Vance stood frozen amid the pouring rain. The voices on his phone still talked about the multi-million-dollar deal, but he heard nothing. His hand went slack and the expensive phone fell straight into a puddle of mud, its screen going dark. Vance knelt down, disregarding the mud that splattered his costly suit. He reached toward Sammy but paused when he noticed an unusual discoloration on the boy's neck. Vance's hand trembled as he checked Sammy's pulse point, and his face changed completely. He shouted toward his vehicle, "Get the first aid kit now. Call the emergency responders and tell them to prepare for an urgent heart procedure. Move it." Arthur Vance scooped Sammy up into the back seat of the Maybach. His driver quickly helped settle Lily onto the remaining bench seat. The luxury vehicle sped off through the heavy rain, leaving the rusty bicycle abandoned by the side of the road. Vance pulled out his phone and directly dialed the county hospital director's number. "Mr. Miller, prepare a specialized trauma room immediately. I'm bringing in 2 children. Don't ask about paperwork, just mobilize your best physicians. I'll be there in less than 5 minutes." The car flew through intersections, ignoring the signal indicators. Vance looked at Sammy. The boy's face was now ghostly white. When the car stopped in front of the hospital entrance, the medical team was already waiting with gurneys. They separated the 2 siblings, taking them in different directions. The head physician quickly examined Sammy right there in the triage hallway. He looked at the vital signs on the monitor and then turned to Vance. "Severe pneumonia. Fluid is built up in the lungs, creating immense pressure on the boy's congenitally vulnerable heart. We must insert a breathing tube and perform an urgent cardiac procedure to save his life." "Are you a family member?" Vance shook his head. "I'm just a good Samaritan, but I'll guarantee the boy's care. Regulations require the signature of a legal guardian to perform any invasive procedure. Without that signature, our hands are tied." Just then, the emergency room doors burst open. Martha stormed in, her face flushed with anger. Roy shuffled in behind her, looking exhausted from a long session at the card tables. Martha glanced around, then began to raise her voice. "What in the heck are you people doing with my nephew and niece, who authorized bringing them to this expensive place? I'm telling you now, I'm not paying 1 penny for any of these so-called VIP services." Roy didn't speak, his eyes fixed on Vance's mud-splattered but expertly tailored suit. He looked down at the expensive timepiece on Vance's wrist and nudged Martha. "Quiet, Martha. Look at this man. Who are you to take our relatives away like this? Are you planning on removing them?" Vance took a step forward, his gaze icy. "The boy is fading fast. The physician needs a signature to offer aid. Are you standing here to argue about money or to assist him?" Martha crossed her arms, her lip curled in a sneer. "Assist. He just has a common cold. A little steam and some ginger tea at home will fix him right up. Are you people trying to fabricate a crisis to bilk my family's benefit plan? I'm not signing anything. I'm taking them home right now." The head physician pointed to the continuously flashing monitor screen. "His oxygen levels are dropping sharply. His heart rate is starting to become irregular. If we don't act immediately, the boy will stop breathing within minutes." Martha stood firmly in front of Sammy's bedside, her face devoid of any compassion. "I'm his aunt. I'm the only legal custodian here. If I say he's fine, he's fine. Are you planning on taking control of a minor unlawfully right in front of me?" Vance felt a crushing pressure in his chest. He pulled out his phone, pressed a number to call his corporation's head of legal affairs, and put it on speakerphone. His voice rang out sharply, overpowering the sound of the machines. "Draft a document immediately to pursue legal action against this hospital for negligence leading to patient demise. Call the district courthouse. I need an emergency petition to revoke custodial rights for child neglect right now. I will cover all financial consequences and court fees. I'm guaranteeing this life with my entire corporation." Martha stared at Vance's phone, then at the physician. She started to falter, seeing the grim determination in the stranger's eyes. Roy gently tugged his wife's sleeve, recognizing that the man before them possessed enough power to completely crush them. The head physician looked at the order just faxed over by Vance's secretary and the financial guarantee. He gave a decisive signal to the security team. "Escort these two out. We are proceeding with the procedure and preparing the medical suite." Quickly, the security team moved in on Martha and Roy, ushering them toward the hallway. Martha still yelled about her custodial rights, but the emergency room door slammed shut. Vance stood there looking through the small glass window. Inside, physicians surrounded Sammy. The dry, cracking sound of the cardiac support device echoed. Vance looked down at his hands, which were still smeared with mud from the incident location. He turned toward the room next door, where Lily was lying. She was still unconscious, but her hand was clenched mid-air as if trying to hold on to something precious that was slipping away. Arthur Vance sat motionless on the cold plastic bench in the hospital hallway. His expensive suit, now soiled with mud, made him look out of place in the sterile white space, thick with the smell of disinfectant. Not far away, Martha and Roy's loud voices still echoed from the security holding area. "If the boy doesn't pull through, who will sign the papers to receive the monthly financial assistance? Roy, did you think about that? And the benefit plan his parents left behind too." Vance clenched his fist. Those words didn't sound like a relative's. They sounded like the calculations of individuals trying to profit from their own nephew's distress. A quiet figure approached him. Head nurse Evelyn placed a thick old folder on Vance's lap and signaled for him to follow her into a secluded corner, out of reach of the security cameras. "I've been waiting for someone like you for a long time, Mr. Vance. What you witnessed tonight wasn't even the worst of it." Evelyn opened Sammy's medical records. The lines of red and blue text were like silent accusations. For the past 2 years, Sammy hasn't had any follow-up cardiology appointments. Look here, his prescription for specialized medication is completely blank. Instead, they only bought cheap multivitamins from the supermarket. And Lily, she's 12, but weighs what a 9-year-old should. She's been skipping meals to give her portion to her brother. Vance flipped through the pages, his eyes stinging. They weren't taking care of them. They forced the children to work in the flower shop until late at night. Lily often came here asking for bandages to treat her brother's scrapes herself. Martha claimed that taking them to the physician was a waste of the shop's money. The silence of these 2 children's bodies is the clearest evidence. They don't know how to lie, but the scars of neglect do. Vance looked through the window of the recovery room. Lily was still there, her eyes closed, but her small, frail hand was tightly gripping the torn hem of Sammy's garment on the bed next to hers. That action was like a final instinct for survival. He suddenly realized how empty his billions of dollars had been all this time. This was not a random misfortune. This was a failed escape from a domestic crisis. Vance called his most senior executive assistant. His voice was low, containing a suppressed rage. "I want you to investigate the entire financial flow of a flower shop called Petal Palace. Find every transaction, every social welfare payment the government provided for those 2 children. Check all bank accounts under Martha and Roy's names. Do it now. I don't have time to wait." As Vance finished his sentence, a piercing sound came from Sammy's room. The indicator light above the door suddenly turned bright red, spinning frantically. Nurses and on-call physicians raced down the hallway, pushing heavy life support equipment. Vance lunged toward the glass door. He saw the head physician jumping onto the bedside, using both hands to apply constant pressure to Sammy's tiny chest. On the large monitor, The heart rate graph, which had been fluctuating, suddenly flattened into a single monotonous horizontal line. The alarm siren blared loudly throughout the floor. Everything around Vance blurred, leaving only the cold straight line on the monitor that was robbing Lily of her last hope. The physician yelled, "Increase the energy level. Apply the cardiac support device immediately, quickly." The cruel secret behind the invisible scars was exposed, but Sammy's heart had stopped beating right before Arthur Vance's eyes. Could money and power triumph over fate in this critical moment? Don't miss the intense developments in the next part. A few minutes later, Sammy's condition stabilized. The physicians were breathing heavily from the non-stop emergency response, but managed a sigh of relief as they had restored Sammy's heart rhythm after 3 continuous applications of the cardiac support device. Out in the hallway, Roy was pressed against a glass column, straining his ears to catch the conversation between 2 passing nurses. "That guy doesn't know a thing. The person guaranteeing the children's care is Arthur Vance, chairman of Vance Real Estate Group. His fortune is in the billions." Roy's eyes widened and greed flared, replacing his initial fear. He quickly slipped into the back hallway, where Martha was slumped in a chair waiting. Roy grabbed his wife's shoulder and shook her hard. "Wake up, Martha. We've hit the jackpot. That rich guy isn't just anybody. He's Arthur Vance, the billionaire, a ridiculously wealthy man who took our relatives without permission. This isn't a mishap. This is our gold mine." Martha looked up at her husband, her dazed expression quickly vanishing. "Billionaire? And he's acting like some hero. Did he cause the incident and is now using money to cover it up?" "Roy, we can't let him get away with this." "Exactly. He's taking control of minors unlawfully. I just called Stan Jenkins. He said he'll be here in 10 minutes. Stan says this case could set us up for life if we play it right." 10 minutes later, Stan Jenkins strode into the hospital lobby in a shiny but cheap suit. He was the area's most notorious ambulance chaser, specializing in civil legal actions. Jenkins greeted Roy and Martha with a confident smile, a thick folder of papers already in his hand. "Listen, time is money. We're going to turn that billionaire into a monster preying on the poor. Martha, you need to cry more. Tell the reporters he used his power to seize Sammy from you. Roy, you keep the face of a deeply injured uncle." In less than an hour, Stan Jenkins had gathered 3 local TV news crews right outside the emergency entrance. Under the camera flashes, Martha began her performance. She wailed, clinging to Jenkins's sleeve, looking directly at the lenses. "Please intervene for my family. A billionaire from the city caused a serious incident involving my nephew, and now he's using his money to silence the hospital and seize our right to care for them. He has Sammy locked up in a room, not letting me see him. We're poor, we don't have a voice, but we love our nephew," Stan Jenkins added in a sharp tone. "My clients are being disadvantaged by the power of money. Arthur Vance is violating legal custodial rights. We will pursue legal action to the fullest extent to bring these 2 children back to their poor but loving family." The report was broadcast immediately. On social media, a wave of outrage erupted. Comments condemning Vance appeared constantly. People called him a ruthless individual hiding behind a philanthropist's facade. At the hospital, the atmosphere around Vance changed noticeably. Nurses who had admired him now looked at him with suspicion. While Vance was standing watching Lily through the glass, his phone vibrated incessantly. It was Victor Sterling, his CFO and longtime partner. "Arthur, what in the world are you doing in that poor neighborhood? Do you know that the corporation's stock is losing hundreds of millions of dollars? The media is attacking you. The merger with our UK partner scheduled for tomorrow morning is on the brink of collapse because of this mess. Victor, I am saving a child's life. That is not a mess. Listen, Arthur, be practical. You're just a passerby. Give them a check, any amount, and get out of there immediately. The board is holding an emergency meeting. If you're not in the office in 2 hours, they will vote to strip you of your executive control. Do you want to lose the entire empire you built for a child you don't even know? Vance looked into the room. Sammy was struggling, Lily clutching her brother's hand. He saw a reflection of himself many years ago, isolated and despairing. I'm not going anywhere, Victor. If our empire falls because I choose to save a life, then that empire was never worth keeping in the first place. Tell the board to do what they think is right. I choose to stay here. Vance hung up, cutting off Victor's frantic protests on the other end. He knew he had just gambled everything he had on a hand with almost zero chance of winning. Vance turned around, intending to step into the room to encourage Lily. He wanted to tell the little girl that he would protect them to the end. But just as his hand touched the doorknob, a jarring noise erupted from Sammy's monitor. The alarm siren wailed non-stop, drowning out the sound of the rain outside the window. The red light in the trauma room spun wildly. Physicians pushed the door open and rushed in, moving past Vance like ghosts. He was forced back into the hallway. Through the narrow gap in the door, Vance watched in horror as Sammy's chest violently contracted. The boy seemed to be trying desperately to draw a breath, but couldn't. The numbers on the monitor began to plummet. A physician yelled, "The boy is in anaphylactic shock. Prepare the cardiac support device immediately. He's slipping away." The trauma room door slammed shut, blocking Vance's view. Behind him, Stan Jenkins and the reporters were scrambling forward cameras, ready to record the moment of the reckless billionaire. Vance stood there, his hands clenched into fists, caught between the collapse of his career and the end of a tiny life. He realized that Martha and Roy's indifference didn't just stop at money. They were actively pushing Sammy toward demise to complete their act. Vance charged toward the medical suite door, but 2 hospital security personnel blocked him. "You cannot enter, Mr. Vance. You no longer have custodial authority here. Martha has revoked all your guarantee of care." The sound of the cardiac support device inside echoed again, this time sounding like a thunderclap in a hopeless night. Vance stared into the darkness of the hallway, knowing that Sammy's time was now measured in seconds. "I need to speak to the physician immediately," Vance roared, but his shout was swallowed by the cold sound of the machinery. He suddenly realized that Roy and Martha had done something more terrible than mere indifference. They had used the law to authorize their cruelty over Sammy's very life. 1 hour later, the trauma room door opened. Head physician Miller stepped out, sweat pouring down his forehead despite the air conditioning running at full capacity in the hallway. He pulled down his mask, his face showing extreme fatigue and tension. Arthur Vance rushed forward, his hand gripping the physician's arm. "How is the boy Miller worse than I thought? Sammy's heart valve is severely leaking, causing reflux into his lungs. If we operate right now, the survival rate is 50%, but if we wait another 24 hours, that rate drops to 0. The boy is out of time." Vance looked through the small glass window. Sammy was completely enveloped by tubes and wires, his face as pale as a sheet of paper. He turned back to Miller. "Then proceed with the procedure immediately. I told you I would cover everything." Physician Miller shook his head, his eyes glancing toward the hallway where Martha Roy and the lawyer Stan Jenkins were approaching. "I can't, Arthur. The law is binding my hands. This procedure is too extensive. I need the signed consent of the legal guardian. Without it, I risk losing my license and the hospital will be pursued with legal action." Vance turned. Stan Jenkins led the way, a fake practice smile on his lips. He adjusted his collar and stepped forward, standing between Vance and the physician. Roy and Martha stood behind him, their faces placid as if they were attending a routine parent meeting. "My clients have made their decision," Jenkins said, his voice ringing with false piety. "They are deeply saddened, but they don't want Sammy to endure any more discomfort on a cold operating table. 50% is too great a risk. They don't want the boy to pass away due to your haste." Martha sniffled, forcing out a few artificial tears. "That's right. The boy has suffered enough. I don't want him to pass away with his body cut open." Vance felt a surge of anger rush to his head. He stepped up close to Roy, looking straight into the shifty eyes that were fixed on his shoes. "You're not afraid the boy will pass away," Vance hissed. "You're afraid the boy will recover and be healthy. If Sammy is healthy, you lose control of his monthly social welfare funds. You want to keep him there struggling but still breathing, just so you can continue to drain money from his wretched life. Isn't that right?" Roy flinched, taking a step back, his lips trembling. "What? What are you talking about?" "We are his only family," Martha shouted, trying to regain her aggressive demeanor. "You have no right to judge us. You're the one who caused the incident. You just want to put him through the procedure to evade your legal responsibility." Vance turned away. He knew he couldn't use reason with people who had sold their souls for money. Just then, Nurse Evelyn approached, gently touching his shoulder. She motioned for him to follow her to a secluded corner at the end of the hallway. Evelyn secretly handed him a small handwritten logbook. "Mr. Vance, look at this. This is the medication log I secretly kept every time the two children came here. Martha has refused to purchase Sammy's prescribed heart medication for the past 6 months. She's been slowly damaging Sammy's heart through calculated stinginess." Vance took the logbook, his knuckles turning white. "This is evidence of medical neglect. I can use this." He immediately dialed James, his assistant. "James, I don't need the financial audit anymore. Get the entire best legal team down to the district courthouse right now. We need an emergency court order to temporarily strip Martha and Roy of their medical custodial rights. Sammy only has 12 hours left. If we don't get that paper here before sunrise, the boy won't pull through." "Understood, sir. I'll take care of it." Vance returned to the ICU room. Lily was sitting on a plastic chair, her eyes red, looking at her brother through the glass. Vance sat down next to the little girl. He felt how useless his vast wealth was at this moment if he couldn't protect a child from his own relatives. "Mr. Vance," Lily whispered, her voice weak as the wind. "Will Sammy wake up? I promised him I'd take him to see the ocean." "We've never seen the ocean." Vance felt his chest tighten. A man who never made a promise he couldn't keep, he now tightly gripped Lily's frail hand. "Sammy will wake up, I promise. I'll take both of you to see the ocean anywhere you want to go. I won't let anyone harm you anymore." Lily looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope in her weary eyes. That night was the longest in Arthur Vance's life. He stood watch outside the ICU room, his eyes never leaving the monitor. James constantly updated him on the situation at the courthouse. Stan Jenkins and the Colemans had long since left to prepare for their counterattack at the early morning hearing. The hospital hallway was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. At exactly 4 a.m., Vance's phone chimed with a text message. James reported that the court had agreed to open an emergency hearing. Vance looked at Lily, who was fast asleep on the chair, then at his phone screen, showing the map leading to the distant district courthouse. He knew he had to make a crazy choice. He turned to Miller, signaling with his hand to prepare everything, and then he dashed out to the hospital lobby, ignoring the security personnel's attempt to stop him. He had to bring that order back before sunrise, or his promise to Lily would become the cruelest deception. The engine of the Maybach roared in the quiet night, speeding away like an arrow tearing through the darkness. Behind him, the hospital's alarm siren had yet to stop wailing. Little Sammy was sinking into the shadows, and Vance was racing against fate itself to reclaim every last breath. Arthur Vance burst into the district courthouse lobby just as the clock struck 6. The long wooden benches in the courtroom exuded the coldness of an unpopulated early morning. Stan Jenkins was already sitting in the opposite row, nonchalantly flipping through his files and chewing gum. Roy and Martha sat huddled beside him, trying to put on the most impoverished appearance possible. James and Vance's legal team nodded in greeting. The hearing began in heavy silence. The judge looked down at the stack of petitions, then at Vance, who was still wearing the mud-splattered suit from the night before. Your Honor, Stan Jenkins rose, his voice full of sarcasm. We are witnessing a textbook case of bullying. Mr. Vance is using his immense fortune to overwhelm a poor family. They refuse the procedure because they love their nephew. They do not want a risky experiment on Sammy's body. They have cared for these children with everything they had. Vance leaped to his feet, not waiting for his lawyer to speak. The money they had should have gone to Sammy's heart medication, not a brand new pickup truck. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Vance, please control yourself. Does your lawyer have evidence of this? James presented a bank statement and the vehicle purchase contract in Roy's name to the clerk's table. Your Honor, last month, Mr. Roy withdrew the entirety of the state-provided medical assistance fund for Sammy to make the down payment on a new Ford F-150. Meanwhile, the boy's medication prescription has been unfilled for 6 months. Roy stammered, standing up his hands, clutching the back of the chair. That's a means of livelihood. The flower shop needs a vehicle for deliveries. Without a truck, how are we supposed to feed the 2 children? We still buy the boy vitamins every day, Jenkins added. Exactly, Your Honor. This is the difficult choice of the poor. They need to invest in their work to sustain a long-term life. Mr. Vance has no right to judge how they allocate their finances. The judge looked at the stack of papers, then at Martha's pale face. He began to hesitate. In custodial law, the line between neglect and financial hardship is often blurry. If Roy could prove the truck served the purpose of raising the children, the court would find it difficult to revoke their rights. Vance felt his blood boil. He knew Sammy's time was running out. He took out his phone and pressed the connection command. Your Honor, I request a special witness, a little girl who is directly enduring this care. The large screen in the courtroom lit up. Lily's image appeared. She was sitting in a wheelchair positioned right outside the ICU room. Lily's face was drawn, her lips dry, but her eyes were bright under the hospital lights. Lily, Vance said, his voice gentle. Tell the judge the truth. About Sammy and about what happened at Petal Palace. Lily looked straight into the camera. She didn't cry, her voice clear, as if she'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. Aunt Martha said Sammy's medicine cost as much as food for the whole house. Every time he had trouble breathing and couldn't sleep, she just gave him a piece of candy and said it was special medicine. She told me to go without because Uncle Roy needed to buy a truck to deliver flowers to rich customers. The entire courtroom fell silent. Lily lowered her head slightly, her hand trembling as it touched the armrest of the wheelchair. But I know Uncle Roy didn't deliver flowers with that truck. He only used it to play cards. Sammy's been experiencing cardiac distress for a whole week, but every time I asked my aunt to take him to the physician, she yelled at me for being a troublemaker. Uncle Roy bought a truck to look important, but Sammy couldn't draw a breath. I don't need anyone's money, I just need Sammy to have the procedure. Martha's face was drained of color. She tried to shout, but Jenkins quickly gestured to silence her. The judge took off his glasses, looking at the 12-year-old on the screen with clear sorrow. He didn't need to hear any more legal arguments. Lily's words had exposed the raw truth behind the family facade. The judge picked up his pen and firmly signed the emergency order. The court temporarily revokes the medical custodial rights of Mr. and Mrs. Coleman. The authority to decide on the procedure is granted to Mr. Arthur Vance under the supervision of the county hospital. This order is effective immediately. Vance didn't wait for James to get the original order. He bolted out of the courtroom and jumped into his car. His driver had the engine running. The Maybach sped like a whirlwind down the highway toward the hospital. At the same time, the court order fax had started running through the hospital's office machine. Vance ran breathlessly through the long hospital corridor. He held the order he had just received from the medical secretary, rushing straight toward the Hart Medical Suite. Martha and Roy were already standing in front of the door. Seeing Vance, Martha lunged forward like a wild animal. "You are not touching him. The boy is mine." Vance didn't stop. He sidestepped her. The hospital security team immediately moved in, restraining Roy and Martha. Roy struggled, shouting crude expressions, but the security guards pushed them into the elevator to take them to the lobby. Their presence was terminated by a thin piece of paper carrying the weight of justice. Vance stood in front of the procedure room door, panting heavily. Physician Miller stepped out, looking at the order and nodding. "Everything is ready. We will take Sammy in now." Sammy was wheeled out on a gurney, surrounded by the bustling surgical team. Lily was pushed in her wheelchair next to Vance. She took his large, rough hand. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. You did it." Vance followed Sammy until the gurney disappeared behind the metal door. He sat down next to Lily, his shirt soaked with sweat. "Now our job is to wait for the boy, Lily." 10 minutes passed slowly. The procedure in progress light came on. Vance looked through the small glass window, seeing the physicians begin to administer sedation to Sammy. Everything seemed to be on track. Lily leaned her head against Vance's arm, her eyes fixed on the red light above. Suddenly, a nurse rushed frantically out of the procedure room. She didn't close the door, allowing the sound of the monitor to echo into the hallway. A long, sharp, cold beep sound. Physician Miller, blood pressure dropping. The boy's heart has stopped responding. Vance jumped up, his heart sinking. He saw Physician Miller leaping onto the bedside, pressing forcefully on Sammy's small chest with both hands. Lily let out a gut-wrenching cry. She tried to rush toward the door, but Vance held her tight. "Increase the energy level to 200 joules. Prepare the cardiac support device immediately." Physician Aris's voice rang out from inside. Vance stood frozen. He saw Sammy's body jump after the first application, but the heart rhythm on the monitor was still a flat line. Lily sobbed in his arms, her small shoulders shaking violently. He looked inside, where the physicians were frantically fighting to restore Sammy's respiration. "Don't go, Sammy. Don't leave us." Vance silently prayed, his palm bleeding from clenching his fist so tightly. The physician's voice inside roared again. "No pulse. Apply the cardiac support device again. 300 joules." Quickly, the red light above the medical suite door began to flash continuously, the atmosphere in the hallway thick with tension. Vance realized that even if he had brought an entire kingdom here, Sammy's life was now as fragile as a spider's thread about to break. Lily began to succumb in his arms from the shock, while inside the procedure room the physician was starting a technical maneuver that Vance knew was the final attempt before giving up. Vance had triumphantly concluded the legal action, but would the order in his hand still matter? when the alarm siren in the medical suite just went off. The legal battle was over, but the fight for life was just beginning. Would a positive outcome come for Sammy? Just when hope seemed to be dwindling, a sound of heavy equipment operation resonated from above. The sound of rotor blades tore through the hospital's quiet night. Arthur looked up at the ceiling. He knew help had arrived. Minutes later, the hallway door opened. A distinguished-looking man of over 50, Dr. Aris, a leading cardiovascular professional from Chicago, stepped in composed in his sterile blue gown. Vance had paid an immense sum to fly him in on a private air transport. Following him were two assistants carrying modern medical equipment boxes, things a poor county hospital could never have dreamed of. Aris walked straight up to Vance. He skipped the pleasantries and looked directly at the medical chart in his hand. I reviewed the data on the flight. This situation is worse than I imagined. The boy's body has been severely weakened for too long, which increases the risks during sedation. Vance gripped Aris's shoulder, his eyes showing an urgency he had never displayed before. Sammy is my focus right now. Please, Aris. Dr. Aris nodded. He quickly ordered the local team to prepare procedure room number 1. The atmosphere in the triage area suddenly shifted, becoming more focused and professional. Nurses began moving Sammy toward the pre-procedure area. The 6-year-old boy's body was tiny amidst the tangled wires and machines. Sammy's skin was blue and so fragile it looked like it might disappear under the bright fluorescent light. The areas of discoloration from the incident were still there, evidence of this small life's vulnerability. In the waiting area, Lily sat huddled in the wheelchair. She was fully awake now, but her face was gaunt, her eyes fixed on the retreating figure of her brother down the long hallway. Vance walked over and sat on the floor right beside the wheelchair, taking her cold, trembling hand. Mr. Vance, Lily whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm so scared. Why are you doing all this for us? You don't owe my family anything. Vance looked down at Lily's small hand. He was silent for a long moment before slowly answering, his voice carrying a distant personal tone. I owe it to myself, Lily. I also had a little brother. His name was Robert. I was 16 then, and Robert was 8. He had the same cardiac issue as Sammy. My parents worked incredibly hard, but the money they earned wasn't enough to secure a spot on the waiting list for a procedure at the city hospital. Lily turned to look at Vance, her eyes wide with surprise. Vance offered a faint, sad smile. Robert passed away right in my arms on a cold winter night because I didn't have enough money to call an emergency transport. I spent my whole life making money building my real estate empire just to ensure I would never be helpless watching a loved one pass away due to a lack of funds again. But I was wrong. I was so focused on making money that I forgot why I started. The sight of you desperately pedaling that bike with Sammy in the rain was a wake-up call for me. You did what I couldn't do back then. I'm not assisting Sammy just out of kindness. I'm assisting Sammy to atone for Robert. Lily gripped Vance's hand tightly. 2 people, one older and one younger, one wealthy and one poor, suddenly found an invisible connection forged by past sorrows. Meanwhile, at the far end of the long hallway hidden behind the vending machine, Martha and Roy were whispering and plotting. Roy was continuously tapping away at a calculator app on his phone. He looked agitated, but not out of concern for Sammy. Listen, Martha, Roy said quietly, his voice full of calculation. If the kid doesn't survive this procedure, it's the fault of that billionaire and that Chicago professional. I've called Stan Jenkins. He said we can pursue legal action against the hospital for at least $500,000 for emotional distress. Martha crossed her arms, her face revealing her greed. Only 500,000. He caused the incident, didn't he? We should demand 800,000. We'll say we were so distraught we couldn't work anymore. He has to pay for seizing our right to care for our nephew. Their greed was laid bare under the hallway lights, a complete contrast to the genuine fear and pure remorse present on the other side. They were not praying for Sammy's survival. They were quietly hoping for a tragedy to fill their empty pockets. Doctor. Iris stepped out of the surgical changing room, already dressed in his sterile blue gown. He paused in front of Vance again to exchange final words. Arthur, this procedure is highly complex. The boy's condition is extremely weak from malnutrition. His heart is smaller than normal, and his blood vessels are very fragile. I will do everything I can, but you must be prepared for any eventuality. Vance stood up, looking straight into Eris's eyes. He didn't talk about the risks or ask about percentages anymore. He placed his hand on the physician's shoulder, an action that completely entrusted Sammy's life to those hands. Eris, I trust you. Bring the boy back to his sister. Eris nodded firmly and turned away. The nursing team began to push Sammy's gurney into the sterile area of procedure room number 1. The heavy metal door closed completely, cutting off Vance and Lily's view of the world inside procedure room number 1. The red light above the doorway was still blazing, but time seemed to have paused in this cold hallway. 3 hours passed slowly like an eternity. Inside the procedure room, the tension was so thick you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Dr. Eris stood focused over the table, his gloves colored. He had just finished stitching the leaking heart valve for Sammy. Now came the most critical moment, disconnecting the heart-lung machine to allow the tiny heart to resume its own rhythm. Prepare to disconnect the machine. Reduce the flow to 0. The sound of the bypass pump gradually quieted and then stopped. The entire room fell into absolute silence. All eyes were glued to the frail chest of the 6-year-old boy and the monitor screen above. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. A single prolonged piercing sound broke the stillness. The indicator line on the monitor flattened into a straight green line. Sammy's heart did not resume beating. It lay still in his chest, resisting life. Heart action has stopped. Prepare the cardiac support device immediately, Aris shouted, his usual calm demeanor. Gone. He grabbed the 2 paddles from the assisting nurse, charged at 200 joules, clear. He pressed the 2 paddles firmly onto Sammy's chest. The small body jolted off the table after the powerful application. Everyone held their breath and looked at the screen. Still the lifeless straight line. The alarm siren of the monitor began to blare, signaling a critical situation. No pulse. Recharge. 300 joules. Apply again. This time the jolt was stronger. The sharp, acrid smell of ozone permeated the cold air of the procedure room, mixing with the physician's sweat. Aris stared at the screen, but the heart remained stubbornly silent. He threw the paddles aside, climbed onto the footstool, and began manual compression at a rapid pace. Inject epinephrine directly into the heart now. Outside the observation room, through the opaque glass, Vance saw chaos erupting inside. He stood up, pressing his face against the glass, trying to see what was happening. Suddenly, the procedure room door burst open. A female nurse rushed out, running frantically toward the blood storage unit at the end of the hallway, yelling into the radio attached to her shoulder. Code red procedure room 1. Need 2 units of O-negative blood immediately. Patient is losing excessive fluid. Lily in her wheelchair jumped at the sound of the shouting. Her frail hands gripped the armrest so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She turned to look at Vance, her eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Vance, what are they doing to my brother?" Why's the nurse running like that? How is Sammy Mr. Vance? Vance swallowed hard, his throat dry. He didn't know how to answer. He knelt in front of Lily, taking her violently trembling hands. He tried to keep his voice as calm as possible, even though his own heart was racing with fear. The physicians are doing their absolute best, Lily. They need more blood to help Sammy regain his strength. Your brother is a fighter, remember? He's persevered this far. He won't give up. Lily shook her head, tears starting to stream down her face. He promised he would go to the ocean with me. He never breaks a promise. Tell them not to hurt him anymore. Inside the procedure room, Aris was still diligently performing compression. Sweat drenched his forehead, dripping onto the floor. While pressing hard on the tiny, fragile chest, the sensitive fingers of a top professional suddenly felt something unusual beneath the soft tissue. "Stop compression, scalpel," Aris ordered. He leaned close to the widening surgical area. Under the extremely bright procedure lamp, he carefully pulled back the layer of heart muscle. His eyes narrowed. "Look at this," Aris pointed to a small blood vessel hidden behind the aorta. It's hardened and almost completely narrowed. This is an old, damaged tissue mass pressing on the blood flow that nourishes the heart. The assistant professional looked startled. How can there be such a large, damaged tissue mass in a 6-year-old child? Pneumonia, Ares said, his voice sharp with anger. Repeated bouts of pneumonia that were never fully treated. The lung infection spread, creating damaged tissue that compressed the already weak vascular system. This damaged tissue is what's blocking the blood flow when the heart tries to beat again. The boy isn't passing away from a congenital heart vulnerability. He's passing away from adult neglect. What do we do now? Blood pressure is dropping to a dangerous level. Aris stood up straight, his eyes burning with frantic determination. He knew he had no time for consultation or seeking opinions. He had to gamble. "Get the smallest size Gore-Tex synthetic graft. I'm going to perform a bypass maneuver right here. We'll bridge over this damaged tissue mass to redirect blood directly into the heart." But doctor, performing a bypass on a heart that's not active and with the chest open is extremely risky. If the suture line fails, blood will spurt out and we lose the boy immediately. We've already lost the boy if we do nothing. Give me the number 7 vascular suture needle. Quickly, Aris began the maneuver. His hands moved with incredible speed, weaving through the narrow spaces of the chest cavity. He excised the block section and sutured the synthetic graft to the aorta. Every stitch had to be absolutely precise. A millimeter mistake would mean demise. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. The air in the procedure room was suffocating. There were only the clinking sounds of metal instruments and the puffing of the ventilator. Aris tied the final knot. He checked the connection. Completely sealed. All right. Release the vascular clamp. Stimulate the heart again. Charge to 150 joules. Apply. Sammy's body jolted for the 3rd time. The monitor was still a flat line. The entire procedure room sank into despair. Aris didn't give up. He manually massaged the tiny heart lying in the exposed chest. "Beat, little guy. Beat, your sister is waiting outside." 5 more minutes passed in a deadly silence. Suddenly, beep. A faint sound came from the monitor speaker. Everyone froze. Beep, beep. 2 more beats, then 3. The blue indicator line began to fluctuate, initially chaotic but gradually steadying. The tiny heart, finally freed from the obstructing damaged tissue mass, had begun to pump blood again. Fresh, richly colored blood flowed through the synthetic graft, sustaining the weakened body. "We have a rhythm," the assistant professional whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. "Blood pressure is rising. 60 over 40. 70 over 50. Aris let out a long, ragged breath, his shoulders slumping. He stepped back, allowing the other physicians to continue closing the chest. He looked at the clock. 45 minutes since the heart stopped responding. 45 minutes wrestling with fate. The procedure room door opened with a slight hiss. Vance leaped up from the floor. Lily raised her head, her eyes swollen from crying. Sammy was wheeled out on a specialized bed, surrounded by dozens of flashing life support machines. The boy was still unresponsive, a breathing tube secured in his mouth. The nursing team quickly pushed him toward the intensive care unit, ICU. Dr. Aris emerged last. He pulled down his sweat-soaked mask, revealing a gaunt, visibly aged face after just a few hours. He didn't smile. He walked up to Vance and Lily. "The boy's heart is active again," Aris said, his voice hoarse. "I had to perform a vascular bypass to overcome the old injuries from lack of treatment. The maneuver was technically successful." Lily began to sob, trying to rush to hug the physician's leg, but Vance held her back, waiting for the second part of the sentence. He recognized this look from medical professionals. It wasn't completely a triumphant announcement. "But," Vance asked, his voice low. "The heart stopped responding for 45 minutes. Although we maintained external circulation and continuous compression, the brain was deprived of oxygen for quite a while. Tonight is the critical night. If the boy shows no sign of neurological reflex or doesn't wake up before sunrise tomorrow, we have to face the possibility of permanent neurological impairment or a persistent vegetative state." Vance nodded slowly. He understood the cost of the delay. He pushed Lily's wheelchair to follow Sammy's bed to the ICU glass partition. Inside the glass enclosure, Sammy lay there small and alone amidst a jungle of machines. The numbers on the monitor danced, signaling the fragile life being maintained second by second. Lily pressed her hand against the cold glass, whispering lullabies her mother used to sing to them, hoping her brother could hear. Suddenly, the phone in Vance's suit pocket vibrated. He was about to turn it off, but the name on the screen made him pause. It was the private investigator he hired to look into the flower shop. "Speak," Vance answered, his eyes still on Sammy. "Mr. Vance, we found what you needed. Not just fabricated records. We found a journal hidden behind an old painting in the parents' office. It contains their true wishes and evidence of Martha's nature before the incident. This is the final element to seal their legal fate." Vance looked at Lily, who had dozed off from exhaustion beside the wheelchair. He looked at Sammy, who was fighting for every breath. A cold anger rose within him. He couldn't help Sammy fight fate tonight. That was for the physicians. But he could fight the demons that had pushed the boy into this situation. Vance took off his suit jacket and gently draped it over Lily's shoulders. He signaled the on-duty nurse to watch over her. Then he turned, walking quickly out of the recovery area. The sound of his leather shoes echoed sharply on the hospital floor. This night was not over, and Arthur Vance was going to resolve the root of this tragedy once and for all. Arthur Vance pushed the door open and stepped into the Petal Palace flower shop. Accompanying him were 2 private investigators and a local law enforcement squad. Gone was the vibrancy of the roses or the pure fragrance left by Lily's parents. What lay before Vance was a scene of decay. Wilted flower arrangements black with mold clinging to the walls. The air was thick with the smell of dampness and cheap smoking materials. Vance stepped over dead potted plants. He saw a deck of cards scattered next to a ripped armchair. On the storeroom floor, plastic chips and debt receipts were mixed in with trash. This place had not been a flower shop for a long time. It had become a clandestine gambling spot for Roy and his associates. Mr. Vance looked at this collection of papers. An investigator handed him a set of accounting ledgers found in a locked drawer. Vance flipped through the pages. Roy had mortgaged the entire flower shop. He had drained the life benefit plan left by the children's parents just 3 days after the commemoration of their passing. Worse, he used the name Fostering Orphans to solicit donations from the community. None of that money went into Lily's stomach or Sammy's medication. It was all spent on all-night card games. The shop had been declared bankrupt on paper last year. Roy kept it only as a cover for his illegal activities. He was exploiting the future of the 2 children to pay off his own mistakes. Vance felt disgusted touching the pages filled with dishonest notes. "Keep looking. I need something with more impact." The team began to search Lily's parents' old office. An officer accidentally bumped into the crooked family portrait hanging on the wall. The painting fell, revealing a patch of wall with a different color. He gently tapped it and pried the wood section open. A secret compartment appeared. Inside was an old leather-bound journal. Vance took the book. Handwritten pages emerged under the flashlight. This was Lily's mother's handwriting. The final pages were written just before the fateful incident. Vance slowly read each line, his eyes narrowed with anger. May 14th. I'm scared of Martha. She's secretly taken money from the shop drawer 3 times this week. Her gambling issue is returning. I must hide Sammy's savings book. May 20th. If my husband and I pass away, I have explicitly stated in my will left with the lawyer. Under no circumstances should Martha be given custodial rights. She will squander the children's future at the card tables, sell this shop to establish a medical trust for Sammy. The last sentence was underlined in bold ink. The mother had seen through her sister's cruel nature. She had tried to protect her children until the very end, but the sudden event prevented her from sending the warning. Vance closed the journal. He signaled the law enforcement team. We're going back to the hospital. It's time to end this act. At the county hospital, the cafeteria was still noisy with people coming and going. Martha and Roy were sitting at a central table. They were enjoying 2 large steak dinners with unusual cheerfulness. Stan Jenkins sat opposite them, scrolling through his phone to check the latest news about the billionaire's legal issue. Roy poured more beverage into his plastic cup. His face flushed. Just wait, Martha, we're set for life. Martha cut her steak and laughed. He thought he was so clever. In the end, he has to pay us anyway. The cafeteria door burst open. Vance walked in, followed by 4 law enforcement officers. The cheerful atmosphere at the table froze. Roy tried to jump up and flee toward the emergency exit, but 2 officers quickly restrained him on the spot. Martha stood up, ready to launch into her victim narrative. What are you doing? This is a hospital. I have custodial rights. Vance walked over and placed the leather-bound journal down between her plate of steak. You have no rights, Martha. Even your sister didn't want you touching the children. Martha saw the journal. Her face turned from red to white in a flash. She fell silent as Vance opened the page with the boldly underlined sentence. Stan Jenkins, seeing the law enforcement and the clear evidence, quietly picked up his briefcase and slipped out the back way. He abandoned his clients without a word. Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, you are being apprehended for financial fraud and severe child neglect. The officers twisted Roy's arms behind his back, securing the handcuffs. Martha was led away amid the whispers of nurses and patients' families. The act of the happy family completely collapsed before the undeniable evidence found within the wilted petals. Vance stood silently watching them being escorted away. He didn't feel triumphant. He only felt exhausted. He turned, walking quickly toward the ICU area. Dawn had just broken. The first rays of sunlight pierced the hallway glass, illuminating the faint dust motes in the air. Vance gently pushed open the door to Sammy's room. Lily was still asleep, slumped next to the wheelchair, her head resting on her brother's bed railing. He walked closer to Sammy. The monitor continued its steady beeping, but the rhythm was stronger. Vance reached out to touch the boy's forehead, but paused. Sammy's tiny fingers subtly moved. The boy gently frowned. Sammy's eyelids fluttered and slowly opened. His cloudy eyes stared at the ceiling, then slowly shifted toward Vance. He looked at the unfamiliar man in front of him. Sammy didn't cry or show fear. He whispered a faint sound, his breath a gentle wheeze. "Sister Lily." "Where's my sister?" Vance felt a stinging in his nose. He gently shook Lily's shoulder. The little girl woke up with a start, her red eyes fixed on Sammy. "Sammy, you're awake." "Mr. Vance, he's awake." Lily rushed to hug her brother. Vance took a step back to give them space. He looked out the window where the sun was rising high. He had done it. 2 months later. The sky outside the county hospital today was unusually clear, completely different from the gray rain of that fateful afternoon. Arthur Vance stood in front of the main entrance, adjusting his shirt collar. He wasn't wearing his usual expensive stiff suit, but a light navy blue sweater and comfortable dress pants. Beside him, the automatic door opened. Lily walked out first, holding a small bag of personal items. And right behind her, Sammy walked on his own 2 feet. The 6-year-old boy who had been struggling between life and demise now had healthy pink skin. Although his steps were still slow and a little hesitant, his small chest filled with healthy breaths, no longer the piercing wheeze of asthma or the weakness of a vulnerable heart. Sammy slowed down. Lily reminded him her hand still hovering behind her brother out of protective habit. Sammy turned back, grinning, a full smile Vance had never seen since their first encounter. "I'm fine, big sister. My heart is beating strong." A crowd of reporters was waiting below the steps, but this time there were no tricky questions or harsh criticisms. Camera flashes popped, capturing the moment the 3 of them stepped into the sunlight. The press called it the Oakwood Miracle. Arthur Vance didn't shy away from the lenses. He placed a hand on Sammy's shoulder, a gesture of absolute protection. He didn't need to say anything. The image of the healthy boy standing beside him was the clearest answer to all previous doubts. As the Maybach pulled away from the hospital, Vance turned to look at the 2 children in the back seat. Sammy was pressing his nose against the window, looking at the world he had almost had to leave behind. Lily was more reflective. She looked at Vance through the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with gratitude, mixed with a slight worry about the future. The car didn't drive toward the airport to take Vance back to New York as planned. It turned onto a familiar road leading to the town center. Victor Sterling was waiting there. The renowned practical chief financial officer, CFO of the Vance Corporation, was leaning against a silver sports car, holding a thick folder of documents. Sterling saw Vance get out of the car, took off his sunglasses, and offered a rare smile. "Am I delivering a letter of departure or congratulations?" Arthur Sterling asked, his tone half joking, half serious. Vance shrugged. "Depends on whether our stock is in the green or the red." Sterling chuckled, tossing the folder to Vance. "Green. Deep green, Arthur. Do you know what happened after the story about you dropping $1 billion deal to assist a child with a heart vulnerability went viral? Our brand value skyrocketed. Investors are calling you the capitalist with a heart. Our UK partner even signed the contract faster because they trust your ethical leadership." Vance flipped through the reports. Profit numbers danced before his eyes, but they didn't excite him as much as Sammy's steady respiration now. "I didn't do it for the stock, Victor." I know. Sterling nodded, his eyes softening, losing their usual calculating look. "That's why it worked. Sometimes investing in people yields a greater return than any skyscraper. The board wants you back in New York immediately to chair the shareholder meeting. They want to honor you." Vance looked toward the car where the 2 children were waiting. He shook his head gently. I won't be back in New York this week. Not next week either. I have an unfinished project here. You run things for me a bit longer. Sterling followed Vance's gaze, understanding the situation. He didn't argue, just patted his longtime partner's shoulder. All right, do what you think is right. Wall Street can wait, but childhood cannot. After Sterling left, Vance took Lily and Sammy to their final stop. The car stopped in front of a familiar address, but the sight before them made Lily rub her eyes in astonishment. The old, dilapidated, mildew-ridden Petal Palace flower shop was completely gone. In its place was a handsome, vibrant two-story building bathed in sunlight. Vance had quietly bought the ownership from the bank after Roy's assets were seized, and he had hired the best architects to renovate it over the past 2 months. The shopfront was replaced with a system of transparent tempered glass, welcoming natural light. Inside, the rotting wooden shelves were replaced with a smart shelving system that automatically watered and adjusted humidity. Hundreds of fresh, beautiful flowers were blooming from deep red velvet roses to pure orchids. But what moved Lily the most was the new sign proudly displayed above the main door. The letters were carved in oak, glistening with gold plating: Petal Palace, Lily and Sammy Trust. This is, Lily stammered, speechless. This is your home, Vance said, his voice warm, and your future. I've established a financial trust in both your names. This shop will operate as a social enterprise, with profits going to help children in situations similar to Sammy's. And when you both turn 18, it will be entirely yours. Sammy cheered, running inside. He touched the petals, inhaling the sweet fragrance he thought he had lost forever. No more smoking materials, no more scattered cards. Only the scent of life and hope. Vance led Lily upstairs. He didn't take the children to live in his luxurious but cold mansions. He understood that true wealth wasn't in gilded walls, but in the place that holds happy memories. The second floor had been converted into a cozy apartment with 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, and a fully equipped study area. Photos of Lily's parents were restored and prominently displayed on the wall, as if they were still there watching over the 2 siblings. I've hired a housekeeper and 2 private tutors, Vance explained when he saw Lily hesitatingly touch the brand new desk. They will help you take care of Sammy and ensure both of your education. You don't have to worry about making money or protecting your brother anymore. Your only task now is to be a proper 12-year-old child. Lily turned around, tears streaming down her cheeks. But these were not the tears of fear or despair like that rainy night. They were tears of relief. The burden of daily survival that had weighed on her small shoulders for 2 years suddenly vanished. Thank you. Thank you for giving us our home back. No, Lily. I only cleaned it up. Your love for Sammy is what kept this house from falling apart. That afternoon, the brilliant golden sunlight stretched across the backyard. Vance, the man used to signing billion-dollar contracts, was now awkwardly holding a pair of pruning shears. He was standing in front of an old rose bush, the kind of flower Lily's mother used to love most. Not like that, Mr. Vance, Lily giggled patiently, adjusting his grip on the shears. If you hold it like that, you'll harm the stem. You have to cut cleanly at a 45-degree angle. Vance followed the instructions, cutting a dry, brown, shriveled branch. The shears made a satisfying snip sound. That's right, Lily nodded approvingly. Mom said those dry branches look harmless, but they drain all the nutrients from the plant. You have to be brave and cut off the diseased branches so the plant can focus its energy on blooming beautifully. Vance stopped watching the dry branch fall to the ground. Lily's innocent remark suddenly echoed in his mind like a profound philosophy. All these years he was like this rose bush, carrying many diseased branches. That was the isolation he rationalized as self-reliance. That was the greedy focus on work he called dedication. That was the indifference he considered professionalism. He had allowed those things to drain his joy of living, turning his heart into a dry, hard stone. He looked at Sammy running and chasing a butterfly in the corner of the garden, the boys' clear laughter echoing through the space. He looked at Lily, the little girl who was wise beyond her years, who had now rediscovered her childlike smile. Vance realized a profound truth. He thought he was the hero in this story. He thought he was the one who reached down to pull the two children out of the mud. But he wasn't. It was Lily with her plea. Help my little brother first, who had pulled him out of the mire of meaninglessness. It was Sammy with his heart restarting from the brink of demise, who had pumped warm blood back into his soul. They had rescued each other. "What are you thinking about, sir?" Lily asked, tilting her head to look at him. Vance smiled the gentlest and most genuine smile he had ever had. "I'm thinking about the diseased branches I just cut out of my life, Lily. Thank you for teaching me how to garden." Lily plucked a newly bloomed velvet rose, the petals still holding drops of water from the automatic irrigation system. She stood on her toes and tucked the flower into the chest pocket of Vance's sweater. The deep red color of the rose stood out against the blue background of his shirt, vibrant like a beating heart. "For you. My mom said the red rose symbolizes love. Now you're part of this garden too." Vance placed his large hand over Lily's small one, then waved to Sammy to come over. The three of them stood together on the porch of Petal Palace. The late afternoon sunlight was setting, casting a golden hue on the new sign. The last rays of the day were no longer harsh, but warm, enveloping the reviving garden. Vance looked toward the horizon where the road ahead stretched out. He knew there would be more challenges. Sammy still needed medical follow-up, and Lily needed time to heal her psychological trauma. But he was no longer afraid or lonely. He had a new purpose in life, a new family, and most importantly, he had learned how to let his heart bloom. The journey from that desperate rainy night had concluded, but another journey bright and full of love had just begun. And somewhere up above, perhaps Robert Vance's little brother and the children's parents were smiling, because in the end, love had triumphed over everything as vibrant as the rose pinned to the chest of the man who chose to stop. Note: the story above is entirely fictional. Character names, locations, and events have been created for the purpose of illustrating an educational and artistic message. Any resemblance to real people or actual events is purely coincidental.